So recently, an article done by Right Wing Watch, which is a Soros-funded organization. Imagine my fucking shock when I found that out. Anyway, the article came back into my view. Its dong of straw mans, poor journalism, and flat-out lying was before me once again. And as I read the article, I could feel the veins in my frontal cortex scream as my blood vessels pumped blood cells there in a vain attempt at keeping my brain cells alive as I read this utter pile of festering garbage. Well, you'll get a good feeling for how this is going to go, and honestly, I should just kind of smash my head against my desk a few times for extra brain-numbing effect. But aside from the title's obvious buzzwords, seeing as white supremacist is becoming just as much of a catch-all term as Nazi, alt-right, and all the other buzzwords, these editorials and journalist hacks have overused to the point of meaninglessness. So to the editor of this article, I have a few words, and I will start with someone I seldom watch. Now, I have to be honest here. I haven't watched many of Black Pigeon Speaks videos, but he does make good content. That aside, I know full well that he is not by any way, shape, or form a white supremacist, aside from the simple fact that he's Asian, or at least I assume as such, considering he's from Japan, as you made a point to point out in your fucking article. But don't see what value that holds in any way, shape, or form. But when you're sucking the dick of identity politics, you like to gag, apparently. As for your conflation of the alt-right with literally as many fucking things as possible that doesn't work with your agenda, I have a simple, long drawn-out statement for you. Libertarianism does not equal classical liberalism, which does not equal conservatism, which doesn't equal anti-Semitism, which I find funny because you probably think Ben Shapiro, a Jew, is a Nazi. You are a fucking turbotard. All the things that I just mentioned, even though they don't equate to each other, you just put under the umbrella of the alt-right, or white nationalist, or white supremacist, as you prefer to call them. When in reality, libertarianism, classical liberalism, and conservatism have very different views on certain things, which, if you were even remotely educated in any of the movements outside of your gilded fuck bubble, you would know. But anyway, moving on. Essentially, you are saying that anything that falls outside of your aggressive ideology is inherently evil and wrong. This is the kind of shit that people in cults say and think. And you don't even have an iota of an understanding about how any of those other ways of thinking, outside of your professor muttering in your ear, they're fucking white males and they are evil. As for the talking point, saying feminism is cancer is not taking shots at empowered women. And transgender people do have a mental disorder. It's called gender dysmorphia. If you took a second to step outside of the aforementioned bubble and read something not slanted to the ultra-left, you may have come across this term, also noted in the DSM-5. However, moving on to this slanderer's next target, we have our beloved Sargon of Akkad. But for the record, I want to make it very clear to anyone who thinks this guy is any iteration of right wing, look at his fiscal policies. I won't get into them here, as this is already going to be a long-winded and drawn-out conversation. So, moving on to tearing this quote-unquote journalist a new asshole to spew internet diarrhea out of, Karl, or Sargon of Akkad as many know him, has shared his platforms with many people that he disagrees with, specifically because of his love for freedom of speech and open debate. As for the Gamergate comment, there was levels of nuance that your tiny brain couldn't fathom. But here's a newsflash for you, Columbo. I get death threats too. It's the internet. You're not your local Starbucks, you whiny little cunt. And I call you Columbo ironically here because if you look past his disdain for feminists and SJWs alike, you'd find a lot of topics that he's particularly left-wing on, mainly fiscal topics. And that's why he calls himself a quote-unquote classical liberal, as you so did with the quotations around that classical liberal I noticed, you fucking smug cunt. But it's a real terminology that has a definition. Fuck, I even looked it up in 5 seconds. Meanwhile, your definition of a quote-unquote alt-right is anyone that isn't a fucking regressive. You hockey puck. You don't even realize your own lack of self-awareness, and you wonder why Sargon and his kind go after you, triggered leftists. Aside from it being funny, you're delusional. But enough about Sargon. Let's move on to the next victim. And it's roaming millennial. Of course it's fucking roaming millennial. Well, first things first, I really have a hate boner for this section, mainly because roaming is one of the most polite individuals I know. Out of all the content creators that I watch on a regular basis, I find her to be the most polite, outgoing. She doesn't, even when she's, reviewing or doing a commentary on a video, she doesn't cut, she doesn't make nasty jokes. She just simply states facts and says, well, you're kind of wrong, and here's why I disagree with you. But that aside, none of her views are quote-unquote far right. Like everything else that is just another way for you, the supposed journalist, to basically say she's alt-right, while ignoring the facts that her viewpoints are relatively mild and more right-leaning libertarian, much like myself. Whilst I add your far-left Nazi rhetoric, see? I can do it too, fuckface. The only difference being I may be joking, but there's at least a little basis in fact to what I'm saying. You're just spewing buzzwords you saw while on Twitter. As for botched debunks, obviously you haven't watched her videos. Who am I kidding? In Roaming's video on this particular article, she blatantly proves that you didn't. She literally debunked your attempt at journalistic integrity. Irony. While yes, she does decry non-traditional gender identity and labels SJWs, and by extension, feminism as cancer, those views by no means make her alt-right. Just means she sees the forest through the trees. Now about having Tara McCarthy on, Roman was being polite to Tara. Politeness does not equate to agreeing with that person's stance. I do know, however, that it is a tactic of regressives to become massively butthurt and start spewing insults and baseless claims because A, you're uncivilized shitheads, and B, you don't want to debate. You want to shout down anyone who has an even remotely different opinion from you. Also, if you actually watch the material you sourced, you hack, you'd find the two disagreeing on everything they talked about. And the debate was about ethno-nationalism. If you had even a little nugget of journalistic integrity, you would have watched the video and realized it was debate. Or maybe you did watch it and wrote this anyway. If that's the case, you're not only journalistically bankrupt, you're also a disingenuous little fucking prick. But now on to the beloved Styx Hexenhammer 666. A man after my own heart. Or maybe he already has it. P.S. Please return my calls, Styxy. Please. I've left hundreds. Joking aside, Styx is a self-proclaimed libertarian, which, if you know what even a portion of the movement meant, you'd second-guess this claim of his harboring of hateful beliefs. But the part I find funny is that you clearly say he espouses nationalistic views without realizing that nationalism does not equal white nationalism. You notice how two words are different? It's not that difficult of a concept to understand. Nationalism versus white nationalism. You notice the word white in there? It's a very important pretense. To somebody that's so obsessed with identity politics, I'm surprised that you can't pick up on this. But as for 4chan and 8chan politically incorrect forums being a racist cesspool, I can neither deny nor confirm, as I don't frequent them. But seeing your recent history of being a lying piece of human garbage, I'm going to assume you're so full of shit your eyes are brown. With that being said, this is the internet. So yes, there's going to be a lot of racism being thrown around. But my biggest point of contention in all of this is when you say that he appeared on alt-right YouTube channels and that he has been boosted on InfoWars and Stephen Molyneux's channel. Here's a scenario. Now bear with me. You go on Fox and try to explain this fuckery. Does that make you sympathetic to everything that Fox says and does? What if Trump gets you in to interview him? Does that make you sympathetic to his views? Because we all know he's the biggest racist. No, it fucking doesn't. But you know that. You're just trying to make ties to people while simultaneously trying to defame multiple people. I hope that when the dust clears on this shit, show that you learn a fucking lesson and become a real journalist. Because at this point, you're worse than a tabloid journalist. You're a fraud. You're a phantom. And you're a cunt. Now, as I draw this massive tirade off, to a close, and I finish off with this dialogue. I wanted to end this on a good note. I know that none of these people I mentioned are alt-right. In fact, all of them share differing opinions on at least a few topics, but discourse is good. That is what people like this supposed journalist don't understand. So go out there and have civil discussion with everyone. Words never hurt anyone. And we all could use a little more civility in life. With that being said, if you feel so compelled, like and subscribe. I do response videos every Tuesday and rants every Thursday. Anyway, I've droned on long enough. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and or night, and I will see you glorious cunts next week.